Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of Weird Music. And let me tell you, today we have a proper doozy of a record. This is an artist that, if you friends of mine have definitely heard me talk about this guy before. It's an artist I've wanted to discuss for a very long time, and I'm probably going to cover more of his material in the future, as I've got a couple of physical releases that are they're baffling, they're very confusing. But they'd be really fun to talk about, basically. So, without further ado, I'm going to present the baffling sound art project of Fingering by Christof Migone. Oh boy, so we've got a lot to cover here. Fingering is a 2012 compilation album of sorts, comprising live recordings by Christof Migone. But who is Christof Migone? Well, Minion is a Swiss-born experimental sound artist currently residing in Toronto. And Mignon's work is incredibly baffling and difficult to access, with it occupying the bizarre world of lowercase sound art for the most part. You get mostly dirty electronics that screech and whine and create this jumbled, random assortment of sounds and noises. It's confusing and it's baffling. And across his vast career, Minion has released a wide number of solo releases exploring the world of sound art, as well as having collaborated with a large number of interesting bands and artists. So, Fingering. Very peculiar name for a record. Anyway, Fingering comprises a number of different tracks that Migone has cobbled together from various performances under his solo adventures. And each track is this sort of weird, frenetic, electronic jarbled mess that sounds like electronic equipment that's, falling apart, smashed into a million pieces and just going blah, 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 blah. And, the resulting sounds that you get from just doing whatever process that is. But the way in which Migone achieves this is, he achieves these peculiar sounds is through using contact microphones to manipulate gutted reel-to-reel machines. It's a really peculiar and odd-sounding process, and yet as inaccessible and weird as this is, Migone has actually used this work to great effect in his solo adventures and in loads of collaborations. Many different bands and artists, including Fly Pan Am, Klaxon Guel, Mecha Fixes Clocks, Set Fire to Flames, which, is the same sister band to Godspeed You Black Emperor, and Tim Hecker and Sam Shalabi. And it's a particular setup that gives this incredibly unique sound to all of these experimental, acts. Like a lot of these bands he collaborates with really try to push out the envelope of experimentalism in terms of what it is they're doing and it can achieve. And Christof's really weird technique of gutted reel-to-reel, machines and contact microphones just adds this layer of jarbled, confusing mess to these already very confusing sounds. Especially on Fly Pan Am, I believe it's on the second record, that record is already a really confusing experience, and having this, these layers of weird electronic jarbled bleh, it just makes the whole thing very peculiar and very interesting. And so, on Fingering, though, it's comprised of these various performances, ranging from live performances to studio performances, and one of the tracks is even a simple recording of what is described as a talkative baseboard heater. It's all just very weird, confusing electronic nonsense sort of stuff. It's very weird. And, with all that, though, you get this jarbled mess of noisy electronics, and it makes for this really peculiar experience that fries your brain if you try to approach it like any conventional album. The sheer experimental scope of this work I find it really weirdly impressive. I find it phenomenal that Christof Migone has this incredibly inaccessible sound, and yet this is all part of his vision, his his creative output, and he just pushes it and pushes it out there. And it's very difficult to enjoy this album in terms of a musical sense, right? It's a very baffling thing to listen to, and yet this is still an album, and a weird album that weirdly for the record label Squint fucking pressed that Christof and Alexander St. Onge run, which this album was released on. They released this one on double disc vinyl, and what a peculiar thing to release on vinyl, right? Like, why? I'm baffled why people would want to put this on vinyl, like sit down with their record, like, I'm in the mood for some electronics, yeah. Very weird, very weird. But at the same time, it's a really experimental release. The scope and nature of it is weirdly impressive. Like, I think I get it, because I find there's something to be weirdly fascinating about the work that Christof Migone does. Like, I'm been interested in his work for as long as I can remember, and I think if I owned a vinyl player, I'd get this one. Like, the artwork is baffling, the spreads, everything in it is baffling. It's all very confusing and stuff. So it's very difficult to talk about this album song by song and stuff. Like, I know I say that a lot. Sometimes we try to, but I find with this one, it's all just like bleep, 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 kind of stuff going on. But what makes it kind of interesting though is like there's a lot of liner notes for this album, and Migone gives us sort of explanations and background information to every single track that's on this album, and it helps give it a sense of concept, like a sense of cohesion. And some of them are kind of interesting. Some of them are actually very amusing. But what they all do is they paint a picture of the life that Migone has experienced in performing these works across the years. So, alongside of the album, you've got footnotes that explain the origins of each initial performance, as well as additional footnotes that give a little bit more flavour to the initial performances and what was happening on those particular days. So we're going to play some excerpts of each of the tracks, so you're going to get a feel for what this album's really like, and go through the footnotes and the alternate footnotes as well. So while we listen to it, we'll have a bit of context to what's going on in these things. Ring Thing, edited from a performance on Sunday, August 3rd, 2010 at the Funny Farm in Meaford, Ontario, as part of Electric Eclectics 5. It was a sunny afternoon. Finger, edited from a performance on Thursday 26th, 2008 at Zoo Bazaar in Montreal, organised by Pavilion Projects. Opening for the man who makes noise out of putting glass in his mouth. Finnering, edited from a performance on Thursday, August 9th, 2007 at the Sala Rosa in Montreal. For a small crowd. Figuring, edited from a performance on Thursday, October 28th, 2004 at the Sala Rosa in Montreal for Algorithmes organised by Perte Basic. Place was packed. Board Heat, recording of a baseboard heater on Friday, November 23rd, 2007 in a hallway of the JPL building at the Banff Centre in Banff, Alberta. A talkative baseboard heater. Fenrigging, edited from a performance on Saturday, September 17, 2011 at KASJB in Sherbrooke, Quebec as part of the Espace IM Media Festival organised by Sporobel. Making it up as I go along. Gignifen, edited from a studio performance at the Pines in Montreal on May 16th to 18th, 2007, recorded by David Bryant. First dip into this material, the rest of which might serve someday. Insubstantial, edited from a telephone performance on Saturday, November 12th, 2000, aired on WLUFM in Chicago for the Outer Ear Festival, hosted by Philip von Zweig. calling from Dumbo, repeating the word fingers for the first half and the word in for the second. As Smoke. Edited from a telephone performance on Saturday, November 12, 2000. Aired on WLUFM Chicago for the Outer Ear Festival, hosted by Willem von Swag. Interruption, remaining unannounced both prior and after. It's amusing liner notes. Like, it really actually, it's one of those things where it gives context, but it also adds so many more questions. Like, for me, what is up with the man who makes noises out of putting glass into his mouth? Like, what is that about? What an act that would be, and goodness me, that, can you imagine trying to follow that? So yeah, they're amusing, but they add a context to the experimental works, and that helps to shape our understanding of them, despite the auditory confusing nature of these recordings. Like, you know, I found listening to this whole thing to be a really confusing and weird experience, but it's one that really makes my mind just wander off, and it just makes me imagine Migone performing these pieces, like, and then cobbling them together into what we hear today. Like, I imagine Christof Migone there, facing that small crowd of people, throwing baffling electronics their way. And then I imagine him just sitting next to the small chatty washboard heater and just recording the peculiar sound that it was making. And there's something super unusual and peculiar about all that. And yet, I don't know, I find there's something kind of human about it as well. Like, you know me, I always say there's something human about these things, but, you know, maybe. This is a man who just has a really peculiar voice in terms of how he expresses his creative intentions, but man, he just does it his own way, and that's kind of cool, I think. And, you know, it's baffling and confusing, like, without a doubt. And yet, I'd argue this isn't even the most difficult Christof Migone album to try and listen to. The man has some absurdly experimental and challenging releases. We might try approach more of them in the future, just because they are so weird, so fascinating though in their own right. I think with that though, we're going to end today's episode of Weird Music. Dirty, squelchy, sonic electronic sound design that doesn't follow any conventional structure, form or norms. It just plays away, it just operates, does its own thing, and you're left in this weird state of delirium and confusion. It's certainly interesting. And Mignone's methods of gutted reel-to-reel machines and contact mics, they definitely produce this otherworldly sound that will transport you to this really peculiar place. It's not for everyone, but here at Weird Music, we want to try listen to stuff that really challenges us sometimes. Like, sometimes we look at things that are a little bit more conventional, I guess, and then sometimes we look at something like this, which is, you know, real outsider stuff. It's really peculiar. So if you want something weird, check this one out. It's bizarre. With that though, I wish you all the best. Take care and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.